and church history. And how many of you had studied church history with me? That's one thing you ought to do. I wish we had done the last class on video. Brother Mike videotaped some of them, but they're misplaced. I wish I could get them all out there. I think we've got 16 videos out there, but it was an abbreviated class of church history. You'd be surprised how many theological fads have come and gone in church history. The 15th chapter. The 15th chapter, and the title of this message is Clues to Research. Clues to Research. You can go along and you can read the Bible, and you can just read it, and it just goes over your head a lot of times. You just read it, and it just, you don't pay attention to what you're reading. When you study every word, especially in the original languages in Greek and Hebrew, it's not going to let it slip by you too well. Brother Roger, you finding that out? We're in the book of Genesis on Sunday afternoon at 4:30 in this classroom, and we're studying prophecy from the book of Genesis. Prophecy from the book of Genesis. Genesis is one of the greatest books of prophecies in the Bible. And that's where we are right now. We're at the end of the book of Genesis, and the next one is, by the way, what's the next book in the Bible after Genesis? How do you say it in Hebrew? Huh? Halei Shemot. Now, what does that mean? In Exodus, it means what? Huh? Exodus means what? The way out, the road out. Ekhodos. All right? Exodus. All right? Two Greek words. The books in the Old Testament are named after what?
The first word.
The first words in the chapter. According to what? The Greek Septuagint, not the Hebrew Bible. All right? And the Old Testament was written in what language? Hebrew. All right. Now, Halei Shemot. Now, what does that mean? These, the names. That's what it means. In Hebrew, the second book of the Bible is called These, the Names. All right? In Greek, it's the Exodus. And we always think about it as the Exodus. How many of you knew that?
I didn't know that.
Did you ever pay any attention to that?
Never paid attention.
Well, boy, did you learn something new today. All right, let me throw another little something to you. All right, let me throw something else out to you, okay? Moses' mother. Okay, what was her name? Huh?
Miriam.
What? That's his sister.
Oh,
Miriam's the sister, yeah.
Jochebed.
Oh, I didn't know.
All right, that was it. What was his father's name? Amram. Okay. Now, Moses' mother was related to Moses in two ways. How many of you know what she was?
Well, she was
She was what?
a stepmother and a mother? I don't know.
No. Moses' mother was what?
oh, his mother and his nurse.
His mother and his what?
His caretaker?
Well, his nurse also, because, they had to put him in the aisle. They had to expose him finally. What else was she? Come on, guys. Think. I'm trying to teach you the thing.
She was the daughter of
She was his aunt. She was his mother and his aunt. Why? Because she was
Pharaoh was their kid.
she was what?
She was the real mother, but the Pharaoh, they took him over so they're baby.
She was his nurse.
No. Well, she was his nurse, all right, but she was his mother and his aunt.
He's a man.
His mother and his aunt. I'm not kidding you. Moses' mother was his mother and his aunt.
So is incest,
Now go look that up. It's there.
so is incest involved here?
Abraham's wife was his what?
Sister.
His sister, his half-sister, okay? All right?
He had 3 wives, right?
Moses' mother was his mother and his aunt. Okay? Let's go look it up. Look it up. Look it up. All right, look it up. It's there. Huh? Now let's go and look at some research in the Bible. Okay? Look at some research. Let's do some research in the 15th chapter. We already looked at the different ideas of the crucifixion of Christ during the week it wasn't really possible for him, Jesus, to be crucified on Friday and raised on Sunday and be in the grave and heart of the earth or whatever you want to call it for 3 days and 3 nights. And it literally says that over and over again. What was the sign? The only sign that he gave to Israel? What was it? What was the sign?
Pillar of fire?
The sign of Jonah. Jonah was what?
3 days.
3 days and nights.
3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a great fish. And I'm going to tell you something about that great fish. Have you ever seen where Nineveh is? And where Jonah was? How did that fish get way over there where he was? Where he ended up? He either swam real fast, I mean thousands of miles, we're talking about now, or else God transported him through the air, one or the other, but God did it. When we see something like that, you accept that. How many of you thought about that fish traveling all that way? You get on a map and get in the back of your Bible, you go look over there where Nineveh is, and you go look where Joseph was swallowed. That fish had to go a long way around, down by Egypt and all the way around and back up the Gulf, back up the Euphrates River, all the way back up there. That's a long way, people. But he did it, and he spit him out on the shore. However, whether he sent him through the air or sent him around by the oceans, but through the Mediterranean, back up into the Persian Gulf and all of that, we don't know. But he got there. We know that he got there.
Does the Bible say anything about his appearance? Doesn't it say something about Jonah when he landed?
When he spit him out on the deal, that he just got up and started going in there and preaching.
Reluctantly.
But was Jonah alive in the belly of the fish?
No.
You say
No, he was dead.
Some people just believe that's more a parable than a true story.
Oh, a parable, yeah.
That's the type of
But some people think Luke's the 16th chapter is a parable. Matter of fact, in some Bibles says it's a parable, but it is not a parable. That is not a parable there. That happened. And it says that Jonah cried out from where to God? Sheol. Where's Sheol? That's Hades. That's a place of departed spirits. He was dead. Was Jesus dead in the grave? Was he or not? Yeah, he was. He's definitely dead. He didn't swoon. Now your Muslims will say he wasn't crucified. We're going to get into that today. Okay? We're going to go in. We're going to just look at little bits and pieces today. Early in the morning, the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes, and the whole council. Now let's look and see what this is. What council are we talking about? Where did the Sanhedrin? Now, where did the Sanhedrin begin? Where did the Sanhedrin get started? Huh? Where did the Sanhedrin get started?
And Jesus was crucified.
Where did the Sanhedrin get started?
Galilee.
No. No. Go back to the book of Exodus. Elei Shemot. Go back to the book of Exodus, the second book in the Bible. Okay? Let's go back to the second book in the Bible real quick. We're not going to go into this a long, long way. All right? And verse number, chapter 18 in the book of Exodus, Elei Shemot. These are the names. These are the names of the sons of Israel. That's how it starts out. And look over there. Let's go back at the very beginning of the book of Exodus. Okay? Book of Exodus. What does it say there? Elei Shemot. That's what it says. Now these are the names. That's how the book starts. But the Greek Septuagint started out as Exodus, the way out. Okay?
Now what does it mean in Hebrew?
Okay, now go back to the 18th chapter of the book of Exodus.
What does it mean in Hebrew though?
Elei Shemot. These are the names. Okay? Elei Shemot. These are the names. All right? We're running a little bit behind here today. All right. Moses' father-in-law. What was his name? Jethro. Is that all the names he had? Jethro had about 5 names, didn't he? Go look up them too. Look up all the names of Jethro. Okay? All the different names that he was called by. All right? Now, Moses' father-in-law said to him, the thing that you are doing is not good. That's when he was being judge of all these people. All these people were coming to him and inquiring of all of their judgments and everything else. In verse 13 onward, it starts up in verse 13. And it came about the next day that Moses sat judged the people, and the people stood about Moses from the morning until evening. And Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, and he said, this thing is too much for you. Why do you alone sit as judge over all the people and stand about from morning until evening? And Moses said to his father-in-law, because the people come to me to inquire of God. 16. And when they have a dispute, it comes to me, and I judge between a man and his neighbor, and make known the statutes of God and his laws. And Moses' father-in-law said to him, the thing is too much. It's not good for you. You will surely wear out both yourself and these people who are with you, and the task is too heavy for you to do it alone. Now listen to me, and I will give you counsel. And be with me, and God be with you. You be the people's representative before God, and bring the disputes to God. Then teach them statutes and laws, and make known to them the way in which they are to walk and work, and they are to do. Furthermore, you select out of the people able men who fear God, men of truth, who hate dishonesty and gain, and you shall place these over them as leaders of thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens, and let them judge the people at all times. And every major dispute they will bring to you, but every minor dispute they themselves will judge. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. And if you do this thing God so commands you, then you will be able to endure. All these people also will go to their place in peace. And Moses listened to his father-in-law and did what he did, and this is where the Sanhedrin was born. How many of you knew that? Did anybody know that? I taught you this before. But too long ago, didn't it? See, I have to review all the time. This is where the Sanhedrin was born, right here. All right. Now the Sanhedrin. What were the basics of the Sanhedrin court? What were the representatives of the Sanhedrin court? What were they supposed to do? What kind of character are they supposed to have? Upright, honest people. The judges in the land of America, in every country, will have the highest judgment more than anybody, because they're over making decisions over other people's lives. Lawyers and judges will be judged harshly by God. They ought to be told that in every court of law. Now let me tell you something about early American history, and even European history. Do you know what a lawyer, a doctor, and a judge had to do before they could get their degrees and their license? What did they have to do, Brother Brett? You remember?
Yeah, they had to get a degree in theology.
They had to get a doctor of theology degree first. They had to completely study the Bible, be certified as a doctorate of theology. Wouldn't that work better today? Huh? Well, over there in the law, they want the judges and the courts with Sharia law, don't they? What do they base their law on? The Quran, which is a perversion of God's Word. All right? Old Muhammad just took what he learned from Bible teachers and things and threw it together and got him a conglomeration and put down what he did, and he didn't even do it. He told it to somebody else because he couldn't read and write. Let's go a little bit further before I get killed with that one. They'll have a hit list on me if they don't already.
Yeah, there's stones out there.
Yeah, they're ready with the stones already. Now let's go on a little bit further. Have you learned something yet today? Early in the morning, the chief priests and the elders and the scribes and the council, the complete council. Now there were 23 scribes in the Sanhedrin. There were 23 priests and 23 elders. And there's one high priest. And how many does that make? Anybody got a degree in mathematics? Brother Randall, you got a Bachelor's of Science degree in mathematics, don't you? Yeah, all right. What's that? How many is that, brother? 70. That's the Sanhedrin. All right. Brett.
Last week we talked about 70 people dying. They could pick 70 people as when they're martyrs for a Muslim. How come it's 70 people?
Let's don't go there, brother. I got a lot of stuff here. Yeah, all right. When a Muslim dies, if he dies of killing himself, Immediately he becomes intercessor. He can pick 70 people in his family to take to heaven, and he will have 70 virgin brides there. Okay?
What's 70
That number.
in Hebrew?
What?
What is 70 in Hebrew?
What do you mean?
How do you say 70 in Hebrew? Isn't that the name of one of the old things of the Bible in Hebrew?
Sevens?
Septuagint?
Shiva?
Yeah, Septuagint. That's 70, isn't it?
It's supposed to be 72, they got it wrong, and then it's 70 or something, I don't know.
What does Septuagint mean?
Oh, the Septuagint. Septuagint. The word Septuagint means 70, but, and this is it in Roman numerals like this. Actually, there were 72. All right, now I covered that here a while back on how that all, the legend of the Septuagint. How long ago did I do that? Which class did I do it in? I teach 3 classes, I get mixed up. Okay, let's go on a little bit further. We'll never get anywhere. All right? Now, these people are supposed to be upright people, but when Herod, and who was Herod a descendant of? Who? Esau. What was the promised son? Who was the promised son? Esau or Jacob? Jacob. So the devil got Esau's descendant on the throne of Israel and not Jacob's descendant. Who was supposed to be on the throne? Joseph was supposed to be on the throne, and Jesus was supposed to inherit the kingship from him. That was the rightful heir to the throne. Not only did Herod, but he killed the high priest, and he installed his own hand-picked people to make up the Sanhedrin, the supreme court of the land of Israel. All right, when Jesus was born, by the way, the Caesars took the ability for Israel to enact the death penalty. They had to go to Rome from that on. All right? From that time on, when Jesus was born, by the time he was born, the right to carry out capital punishment by the nation of Israel was taken from them, and they had to then go to Rome. And that's where we are right now. Okay, now we're doing something. You got some background here now? All right. Is this too much for you? You learning something? Is it too much? Did it go over all of your heads today? Didn't mean to. Early in the morning, the chief priests and the elders and the scribes and Archeres, all right, the chief priest, the Rosh Cohen in Hebrew, the head priest and the whole council immediately held a consultation, binding Jesus. Now, first of all, that was illegal, wasn't it? They couldn't bind him until they brought charges against him. Binding Jesus, they led him away and delivered him to Pilate, Pontius Pilate. Now, I read Pontius Pilate's letter. Had Pontius Pilate, did he know about Jesus before?
Everybody did.
Everybody knew about Jesus. All these people knew exactly where he was born. They knew who his family was. They knew all about him. These Jews had all of the reason in the world, because Jesus' miracles were what purpose? To prove that he was the Messiah. That's why he did. What was one miracle that only the Messiah would do? He would heal the blind. Now, he had done that. I mean, he healed a bunch of blind people, didn't he? They didn't miss that boat, but they kept trying. The man that had been born blind, what did the Sanhedrin and what did the local synagogue do to him and to his mother and father? They kicked him out of the synagogue. They put him on trial. They had a little trial in the synagogue there, and he said, "Who healed you?" "I don't know. I didn't know who he was. Never knew him before anything else." They asked his parents, "Who healed your son?" And I was like, "I don't know. Ask him." But you know what? They got a certificate of healing. This man was blind. And then they accused Jesus of practicing medicine. They said he was just a real good doctor, that he was practicing medicine on the Sabbath. That's what they said. That's the charges. And Pilate questioned him, kept on questioning him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And having answered, he said to him, now I'm saying this from Greek, okay? I'm reading from the New American Standard, but I'm throwing some Greek in it, okay? And having answered, he said to him, "It's just like you say." In other words, "Yes, sir, I am the king of the Jews." That's what he said. And the chief priest kept on accusing him. These are the head priests now. These are the Sanhedrin. And these people are a bunch of thugs. thugs. They don't care anything about justice at all. They couldn't care less. Why did these people want to kill Jesus?
Their power.
Because he was taking their religion away from them, and he was taking the politics into his hand, because he was going to be the religious and the political leader of all of Israel. When did Jesus take over the reins of his kingdom? When did it happen? He did it. When did he? He already called out a replacement. There at the seashores of Galilee, he started calling out his church, ecclesia. And what does ecclesia mean? Ecclesia.
The one called out.
One's called out. Was that a new term when Jesus used it? No. It was an old Greek term, because every city-state and every province in the whole Roman and then Grecian Empire before that had these little groups that were democracies. But they were picked out and they were elected by the town, and they called the draft. They got soldiers. They collected food for the armies. They took taxes and everything else, and that was called an ecclesia. And so Jesus' little body of believers was called an ecclesia, which was a democratic government taking their rules from the king or their emperor, which was Jesus. Okay? Now let's go on. And the chief priest kept on accusing him harshly, continuously, over and over and over again. Continually repeating the same charges. And Pilate was questioning him again, saying, "Do you make no answer? See how the many charges they bring against you?" Now we know that Jesus had already been before Pilate, and Pilate had allowed him to what? To carry on his ministry, because Pilate said that he didn't see anything wrong with what he was doing. But Pilate had asked him to knock it off a little bit, because those people are going to try to kill you and get me in trouble.
And like 4 times he gets finished.
That's right. Yep. What?
4 or 5 times he asked him to knock it off.
Yeah, to slow down against those rats, because they're going to come after you. Now, during this trial, Pilate announces that Jesus is innocent how many times? 5 times. 5 is the number of what in the Bible? 5 is the number of grace. But Jesus made no further answer, so Pilate was astonished. Verse number 6. Now at the feast he used to release for them one prisoner whom they requested. Now we found out earlier in this that Jesus had the Passover one day early, didn't he? That should have surprised the disciples when he had the Passover with them a day early. All right, because here is the eve. When Jesus went on the cross of Calvary at 9 o'clock, what were they doing in the temple area? What were they doing? They were sacrificing the Passover sheep. That evening they were going to do the Passover. Okay? Now let's look at this. And now at the feast, the Passover feast, he used to release for them one prisoner whom they requested. And this is what he would call the what? The scapegoat. The scapegoat. You remember they took 2 goats in Israel. They had a scapegoat, and they had one goat, and they took it, and they confessed their sins on the head, and they slit its throat. Killed it. The other goat, they would take it out in the wilderness and turn it loose and make it not come back. Josephus said they'd take it out there to a high cliff and push it off the cliff so it'd die. And it wouldn't come back home, because if it came back home, what? It brought their sins back. Okay? And so he would release one. Pontius Pilate was a very educated man. Okay? Very educated man. He knew Hebrew, he knew Latin, and he knew Greek. All right? And he wrote in 3 languages the plaque that went over Jesus' cross in his own hand. It says that in Greek. Okay? He wrote it in Latin, he wrote it in Hebrew, and he wrote it in Greek. Okay? Now he knows the Jewish customs. And when I read Pontius Pilate's letter to Caesar, to Titus Caesar, he said they were breaking all of their own laws. Now these Sanhedrin are supposed to be honest and above reproach, weren't they? according to the book of Exodus. Verse number 7. And the man named Barabbas had been imprisoned with the insurrectionists and had committed murder in their insurrection. Who was he? Who was he? He was one of the what? The Sicarii. What does the Sicarii mean? Dagger men. Who were these Sicarii? They were the founders of Sicily. Where did the mafia come from? The Sicilian mafia. These are the fathers of the mafia. Okay? This man was a murderer. These are the people that inhabited Masada. They're the ones that would slip out there with those long knives and stick that knife in the heart of those Roman soldiers and walk off and murder. This is what you call terrorism. These were the original terrorists. He was one of the terrorists. Not only did he terrorize the Romans, but he terrorized Jewish citizens. Remember the story of the Good Samaritan? The Samaritan was a bad people, and they went by and they saw this man laying out there, beat all up and everything. It's because maybe Barabbas did it. Barabbas is what language? That name? Aramaic. And what does Barabbas mean? Son of the Father. What is the word son in Hebrew? Ben. What is the son? The word son in Aramaic? Bara or bar. Okay. Barabbas. Son of the Father. Who was his father? It wasn't the Lord of heaven. Okay. This guy is bad. This guy is a murderer. He's an assassin. He's the original mafia. He's the Sicarii. Look it up on the internet or whatever. Look up the word Sicarii. That's who he was.
Abba is Aramaic too.
Huh?
Abba.
Abba. Well, Abba is Hebrew and Aramaic. Okay? Abba comes from two Hebrew words. Aleph and Beth. Aleph and Swat.
They had a house.
They had, but no. Let's go back to the Hebrew letter.
Aleph is the first.
Aleph a long time ago was like this.
An ox.
The head of an ox. That's what the Aleph came from if you read ancient Hebrew, okay? And so it means head, and then Beth, house. And you look at these in the Hebrew, every Hebrew letter has a symbol. And Aleph is the head of an ox, and the Beth is the house. And the father is the head of the house. And also the Aramaic and the Jewish people said that a child, when it spoke its first words, it was calling for its father, and it was Abba, 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 Abba. Okay? So now we got son of the Father here, okay? So we got that. Now, he went right back to doing what he did before. That's exactly what he did. He went right back to doing what he did, Brother Bill.
I'd like to point out here and this is how history repeats itself. You got the unsaved releasing the unsaved. Brown, with his prison bill, has got the unsaved releasing the unsaved. The Bakersfield District DA, since he started his prison bill, has more than doubled his cases in 1 year. More than doubled his cases since Brown started releasing the unsaved.
Let's go on now.
History repeats itself.
Let's go on. And the man named Barabbas had been imprisoned with the insurrectionist who had committed what? Murders. Multiple murders. This man was a mass murderer. In the insurrection. These are all the Sicarii. That's who it is. Who were the two disciples that Jesus had that were Sicarii? Judas and Simon, the zealot, or the Sicarii.
Yeah, it was Simon that pulled his back ear off too.
No, that's different. That's Simon Peter. Okay, don't get them confused. Now let's go on. And the multitude went up and kept on asking him to do as he had been accustomed to do for them. And Pilate answered and them saying, "Do you want me to release you to the King of the Jews. Now, first of all, he gets the most worst character, the most vile criminal. And he lets, do you want me to turn Jeffrey Dahmer loose on you? How would you like to have Adolf Hitler? Or Jim Jones? Or Charles Manson? Do you want them? Or do you want this King of the Jews? Guess who they asked for? The worst man. The man that had killed their families, had murdered, had left orphans all over the country. They called for this Jeffrey Dahmer. They called for this Charles Manson to be turned loose. For he was aware that the chief priests had delivered him because of envy. He knew what was going on. But the chief priests stirred up the multitude. These are the head priests. These are the leaders of Israel. These are the ones that they would confess their sins to, and they would lay their hands on the lambs. That day, this very next day, they would be laying their hands. These are the ones that would be laying their hands on those lambs for the Passover. And they would slit their throats. These are the ones that were calling for the death of an innocent man. But the chief priest stirred up the multitude and kept on asking him to release Barabbas for them instead. What would Barabbas do in the end? What would this cost Israel? What would the release of Barabbas cost Israel?
The loss of the temple.
The whole loss of the temple and the complete destruction and the diaspora of all the people. Jesus looked over to Israel and he said, "Oh, Israel, oh, Jerusalem, how many times I would have called you like a mother hen does her little baby chickens, but you would not come. Not many days from now, there won't be one stone left upon another here." Because of Barabbas. That's what would happen to Barabbas. He went right back to the same old story. Okay, the same old, they talk about never another Masada. Yeah, there's going to be another Masada. And why did they have the first one? Because of Barabbas. Because of Barabbas. And answering again, Pilate kept on saying to them, "Then what shall I do to him who is called King of the Jews?" And they shouted back, and they kept on shouting back and saying, "Crucify him, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him." Remember when I read the letter to you? Pilate's letter? He said the whole place, the place was made out of stone, wasn't it? And I've been in there in this area here. And they were stomping their feet and screaming. And he said it sounded like the demons of hell were released. The howling, and the place was shaking and trembling from their screams. How many of you ever been in a stone house or a castle like the Praetorium was? How many ever been in, and you hollered one word? How about some of these old Catholic churches? You get up there where the pulpit is, and you can whisper to say, "Bread," and it just echoes. How many of you ever been in a deep canyon like that? And then all of the screaming, "Crucify him, crucify him, crucify him." And then Jesus said in verse number 12, or Pilate said in verse number 12, and answering them again, Pilate was saying to them, "Then what shall I do to him that is called King of the Jews?" And they shouted back, "Crucify him." And Pilate said in verse 14, but Pilate was saying to them, he kept on saying to them, "What evil has this man done?" And they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." Verse 15, and wishing to satisfy the multitude, Pilate released Barabbas to them. Here's your Charles Manson, take him. After having Jesus scourged, he delivered him over to be crucified. Now, I want to go back. Now, just think about this. Pilate was doing everything he could to try to get Jesus turned loose. He was doing everything he could. Pilate's wife had a dream. And what is a dream called? In Greek, it's called what? Hypnose. Do we have a term in English, hypnose? Hypnose. Hypnosis. Hypnosis. Okay? Hypnosis. Now, God communicates to people in dreams. I'm sure that how many people in the Old hold on just a second. How many people in the Old Testament had dreams?
Oh, that's.
Huh? I mean, just name it, just over and over again. Did Pharaoh have dreams?
Yeah.
Did Joseph have dreams?
Yeah.
Did Abraham have dreams? And what did God do? This is what we call, this is when he put them in a hypnotic trance and he revealed information to them.
Samuel had dreams.
Daniel had dreams.
Prophecy.
It's prophecy. Paul had dreams. Jacob had dreams. Joseph had dreams. Pharaoh had dreams. Abimelech had dreams. And who was the author of all these dreams? God. God put them in hypnotic trances, hypnosis. They say that in early America that they were using hypnosis, and in Egypt they were using hypnosis as an anesthetic, anesthesia. They would put people in hypnotic trance and they would operate on them and everything. Yes.
Is that, so if we have a dream and God wants to teach us something, is that what we call a vision?
Well, after we receive the Bible, we don't have any more visions. All right? But that's the way God did things so many times. Your subconscious and everything, I'm not saying God can't use dreams to reveal something to you. How many of you have ever gone to sleep at night and had a problem and woke up in the middle of the night and had the problem solved? All right. That's when your mind works without all the stresses of the world. Okay, let's go on now. So his wife had a vision. And he took him and he had him beaten, terribly beaten. And Pilate, now this is only one of the books where this is given. How many, do you know what synoptic means? How many synoptics are there in the Bible? How many, Brett? Three of them. Okay, 3 of them. And what does synoptic mean? It comes from Greek. Okay, scene means what? Together. Symphony, sound together. Symphony is sound together. And synoptic, have anybody here got an optometrist? All right, that's an eye doctor, okay? It means to see together. That's what synoptics. There are 3 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, that are synoptics. And John. John is not a synoptic. John is totally different. Why did John write his Gospel? To prove, why did John write his Gospel? To prove that Jesus was Jehovah in flesh. The first thing he said, right off the bat, was in beginning, NRK, ain ho logos. In beginning, kept on being the Jehovah. And the Jehovah kept on being an inseparable part of the Godhead because Jehovah kept on being God. And John 1:14 is what? In Greek. Quote it. Kai ho logos sarx agenito. And the Word, the Jehovah, flesh he became. That's it. All right? That's why John wrote it, but John wrote about this thing too. In all of those Gospels and synoptics, you put them all together. And you're going to find out that Pontius Pilate had Jesus beaten so badly that he thought he would be almost dead, and he thought that these 70 rats would have mercy when they saw a man almost at the point of death. I mean, you can see your enemy, and when you see him hurting and in terrible pain, sometimes you'll have mercy upon him, and that's what Pilate thought, that they would have a little mercy on Jesus. But he underestimated the evil. And how do you say evil in Hebrew? Ra.
Jim,
Ra.
you think Pontius Pilate was a closet Christian? After reading the article.
Well, Pontius Pilate did write a letter to Caesar and asked the Roman government to recognize Jesus as God.
I think he was
He did that. That's historical. That's a historical fact. Okay? Let's go on a little bit more. I believe that we might see Pontius Pilate in heaven. Okay? Maybe. All right? And he delivered him to be crucified. First of all, he delivered him. He said, behold, he said, ecce homo in Latin. And there's a place over there, right there, where it says ecce homo. Behold the man. What do you want me to do with him now? After he had him released, it doesn't say that here, but in other places it said, behold the man. Look at him. Now what do you want me to do him? And they kept on screaming, crucify him, crucify him. Now, it doesn't say that here, but that's what happened. Okay? And the soldiers took him away into the palace that is called the Praetorium. And together the whole Roman cohort. And they dressed him in purple and weaving him a crown of thorns, and they put it on him. And they kept on claiming, "Hail, the King of the Jews." And they kept on beating him on his own head with a rod and spitting at him and kneeling and bowing before him. This was a game that they played. I've been in this very place where this happened. And after they had mocked him, they took the purple off of him and put his garments back on him, and they led him out to crucify him. Now, when they got him to the cross of Calvary, I'm going to tell you something. They stripped him naked. Jesus didn't have any breechcloth on. He had nothing on him. He was totally naked. Naked. Put on that cross. They drove nails to his carpal tunnel area right here. How many of you got carpal tunnel syndrome? Anybody got that? That hurts a lot, doesn't it? How about you driving nails through there?
Very painful.
Yeah. And they drove it through his ankles. Both of his ankles. All right? And they, verse number 21 now. Here we got another little hint, another little clue to research. How many of you got some today? You got some clues here? Have you got some clues today? All right. And they brought him to the place called Golgotha, which is translated place of the skull. All right, this is Calvary. Now there are several different Calvaries over there in the Middle East, in Jerusalem. I've been to them. We looked at pictures of them when I showed you the pictures. All right. Now, whichever one it is, we do not know. We know that the Catholics' Calvary has been there the longest. And in the 1800s, the Englishman over there called Gordon, he went over there and excavated that area, what's called Gordon's tomb. And when you go over there, it looks like a skull, and they had crosses up there. I've been to that one also, and in that tomb there. Anyway, and they tried to give him wine mixed with myrrh. Tried to give him wine mixed with myrrh. What is myrrh? What is myrrh?
Laudanum.
Huh? Laudanum. What is laudanum? Opium. It's a drug. They were being kind to Jesus. They were going to give him vinegar, which is, or wine. Wine, which is what? It's an alcoholic, intoxicating thing. Did Jesus ever drink wine? Gobs of times he drank wine. Everybody drank wine back then. You couldn't drink the water.
Had so much parasites in it.
It had too much bacteria and parasites in it. If you pour wine in the water, the alcohol would kill and purify the water. Okay? I went over there, I got into that too. You know, I was over there on a geological expedition, an archaeological expedition in 1975 and 76. I know that's ages ago. And I got that Rocky Mountain Quick Step while I was there. It's bad. And finally, I got into Jerusalem, and Brother Cross, Dr. Cross, brought a bottle of wine to me. He said, "Jim, drink this wine." He said, "It'll kill some of that bacteria." And they had given me shots and all kinds of stuff. I lost 40 pounds. I was dying. I had it good, Bill, real good.
Montezuma's revenge.
Old Brother Madden looked at me and he said, "Boy," he said, you got poison come out of you both ends." I even left a deposit on top of Mount Pisgah, overlooking the Holy Land. They gave him wine mixed with opium, but he did not take it. And they crucified him and they divided up his garments. They stripped him naked. Among themselves, casting lots, and they were gambling to decide. They were rolling dice, basically, is what it was, a dice game, to decide what each should take. And on the third hour, what's the third hour?
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock in the morning. What were they doing in Jerusalem right now at 9 o'clock? Sacrificing the Passover sheep. Right when Jesus was put on the cross, they slit a sheep's throat. They slit a lot of sheep's throat. But this is when they were getting ready.
Jim,
It
can I
was-
ask a quick question?
Yes.
You said they give him wine with opium to drink.
Yeah.
Was that so he would last longer on the cross?
No, they were being kind.
No kind of-
They were giving compassion. They were showing compassion to him. They were going to give him, because they were getting ready to drive the nails through his hands and through his feet. Okay? They're going to give him a little painkiller. Here, boy, take some painkiller, because it's going to hurt.
So he wouldn't die of shock.
Well, they were just being kind. Okay? And when the third hour has come, they crucified him. And the inscription of the charge against him read, now, in other places, it says, who wrote it? Who wrote it? Pilate wrote it. The King of the Jews. Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. And it's written in how many languages? Written in 3 languages. Latin, because we have the Roman government. But what was the language of the Roman government? What was the legal language? Greek. And of course in Hebrew, because he was the Jewish king. And they crucified 2 robbers with him, one on one side and one on the other side. Now, I want to tell you this also. We've got 4 different accounts of this. And maybe, and Bullinger says this, maybe he was crucified like he was here, and 2 on either side. Maybe there was 5 of them crucified. And there were 2 close to him. And 5 is the number of what? Grace. All right. I just want to tell you that. You can go and look that up too. That's something else for you to see. That's a little something else.
So instead of having just 2, when they're speaking of 2, it could have been 2 on each side.
It could have been on 2 on either side, because it says that in one of the synoptics. Now, we're almost finished with the Gospel of Mark. We have done Matthew, and now we'll be finished with Mark, and then we're going to go to Luke. Luke is a physician. He's a physicist. He is a physical scientist. All right? He's a physicist. All right? All right, and they crucified robbers with him, one on the right side and one on the left. And what's wrong with verse number 28? How many of your Bibles have verse number 28?
It's in brackets.
It's in brackets. It's not there. Number 28, there's nothing doctrinally wrong with verse number 28, but in the original language, it's in the Greek, it's not there. It was added many years later. Okay? It was some preacher's note. Is what it was. And let's read it here. It says later manuscripts add. Later manuscripts add. Much later manuscripts, okay? Like 12 or 1400 AD, that's a little bit early, or a little bit late for being inspired, okay? And the scripture was fulfilled, which says, and he was reckoned with the transgressors. Now, in some of the other Gospels, it says that. But here, in this one, it really didn't say that. Verse number 29, and those passing by were hurling abuse at him, wagging their heads, and saying, Ha, you who are going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. He didn't say he was going to destroy the temple, did he? Caesar was going to destroy the temple. Save yourself and come down from the Christ. And in the same way, the chief priests among the scribes who were mocking him among themselves were saying, he saved others. I tell you what, they took sessions, or what we call relays, of these priests there at the cross, and where were the rest of them? Crucifying or sacrificing the lambs. He cannot save himself. And what did Jesus, why did they so hate when Jesus said your sins are forgiven? They said only what? Only God can forgive sins, and you're a man. And then he said, to prove to you that I can forgive sins, that the Son of Man has power to forgive sins on the earth, he said, rise and walk. He raised the dead. He healed the blind. He raised the crippled and all this. He cannot save himself. Verse number 32. Let this Christ, the King of the Jews, now come down from the cross so we can see and believe. Now, I'll tell you what, if he'd have come off that cross, they wouldn't have seen and believed, would they? They'd have done it again. They'd have crucified him again. Come down from the cross so that we may see and believe. And those who were crucified with him were casting the same insults at him, except for one of them. There was one there that didn't. One on his one side did not. And when the 6th hour had come, what time is that, young lady?
Noon.
At noon. When the 6th hour had come. The hour started from 6 a.m., okay? When the 6th hour had come, darkness fell upon the whole land until the 9th hour. What's the 9th hour? 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And in the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice in Aramaic. This is Aramaic here. This is Aramaic. What writer quotes Hebrew? Which writer quotes Hebrew? Huh? No. Which writer, New Testament gospel writer? Kata Mattheon, Kata Luke, Kata Marcon, Kata Lucon, or Kata Iwane? Which one of them quotes the Hebrew? Huh? Matthew. Matthew is Ili Ili Lama Sabachthani. Okay? This is Eloi Eloi Lama Sabachthani. Almost the same. The language are very close together. But this is Aramaic. What? This gospel, I'm sorry I've run you so late today. I wanted to go down here to verse number 42. Okay. Why did Mark write and speak in not write, he wrote in Greek, but why did he quote Aramaic all the time? This is called what? Whose gospel? Peter's gospel. It's because he was a very close student of Peter, and this gospel of Mark is called Peter's gospel because he wrote it through Peter's eyes. And he said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Now, he quoted the whole 22nd Psalm here, is what he did. You go read Psalm 22, and that's what Jesus quoted. And when some of the bystanders heard it, they began saying, behold, he is calling Elijah. They didn't even know Hebrew, and they didn't know Aramaic either. Now, we know that Jesus spoke in Hebrew, but Mark writes it in Aramaic. Okay? And someone ran and filled a sponge with sour wine and put it on a reed and gave him a drink, saying, let us see whether Elijah will come and take him down. And Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last, and the veil of the temple was torn from the top to the bottom. And when the centurion who was standing by right in front of him saw the way that he breathed his last, he said, truly, this was the Son of God. And there were also women looking on from afar. Among them was Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, the less, and Jose, and Salome. And when he was in Galilee, they used to follow him and minister to him. And there were many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem. All right, we'll start out with verse number 42 next week, right there.
Is that my God, why have you forsaken me? Is that the actual translation of what he said?
That's right. It is Psalm 22 and verse 1. If you go to Psalm 22 and verse 1, and you'll find it. But he didn't just say the first verse. He quoted the whole psalm. And if a Hebrew rabbi in a synagogue or the temple, if he quoted one verse, it meant the whole psalm. So if you read 22nd Psalm, they knew exactly what he was saying. Everything in the 22nd Psalm is talking about the Messiah being crucified. And when he spoke those words, they ought to have known what happened. Thank you so much for your attention today. I'll see you at 4:30 this afternoon, the Lord willing, if you want to come and listen to prophecy from the book of Genesis. All right. Brett, you going to come up here at all? Have you got any announcements at all?
I got some announcements.
Okay, and prayer requests, we got any of those things?
I have one.
Okay.
Well, we got our grow thing, Tuesday visitation reminder on April 30th. It basically teaches us how to get people into our classes. So we feel awkward about, asking people to come to Sunday school, or we don't know what to say, or maybe we're stuck for words. The encouragement training